Hi everybody, Matthew Turner here. Well, it's been a while since I've done an update on my journey through Bob Dylan's catalog, so I'm overdue, so I've got quite a few things to show. Just to recap, since this is actually the third video in the series, if anybody missed the first two, I'll have a playlist on my channel so that you can find those easily if you want to go back and look. But just in brief, of course, I was very familiar with Dylan's songwriting. Didn't particularly care for his vocals as I was, growing up and into adulthood, listening to music, collecting music, and so I never really bought any of his albums. But of course, I knew various songs from other people doing them, or hearing his version, here and there or whatever. And around, I guess, the last December, end of 2021, I decided I was going to give him a fair chance and listen through to his albums. And I thought, with his voice, I thought maybe a younger Dylan might be easier to get into. So I started with his first studio album and decided I was going to work through his studio albums, at least for the first few, and just see how it went. And as of where I left off at the previous video, I'd gotten up to Blonde on Blonde. And in addition to those first 7 albums, I had bought the Bootleg Series volumes 1 through 3. And I determined that going forward, I was still going to go through the albums in chronological order, the studio albums. But as I had time and opportunity, I was going to also look into Bootleg Series, live albums, whatnot. So since that video, I actually got a little off track diving into some of those bootleg series and things, and not following as long on the studio albums as much for a little while. Just a happenstance, the record shop I go to, I'd go there for records and look through their used CDs, and they always had plenty of the Dylan bootleg series, so I would pick up some here and there. So anyway, I'm going to deal with those first, or actually deal with the live releases, so bootleg series and not, that I got since then. So this was the first thing that I picked up, and this is Bootleg Series Volume 4, Bob Dylan Live 1966, and it's the Royal Albert Hall concert, with Royal Albert Hall in quotes, because the show was actually recorded in Manchester, but it was widely bootlegged as the Royal Albert Hall show. So this is that show. It's that UK tour, 1966. He's electric now. And his concert, first half would be solo acoustic, and that's what's on disc 1 of this set, and disc 2 has the second half of the concert, which is the electric. And this is a great performance. I really like this one a lot. Some of the songs in the acoustic set are songs that had some electric instruments on the album version, so it's kind of interesting to hear that take. And then the electric set is really great. Bob and his band both give great performances. I love both parts of the concert, both the solo acoustic and the electric band set. He really was on fire on this tour, as far as I can tell from this and just other little bits that I've heard. So this is a great concert. I really enjoyed this one a lot. Next one I got was this one, another live album. This is Bob Dylan Live, Rare Performances from the Copyright Collections 1962 to 1966. So all those copyright collection releases that came out on the 50th anniversary of each of those years included a lot of live recordings. So they did this 2-disc set to kind of round up some of the best performances. This is a pretty nice overview of those years, I think, live, because we get songs from all those different years and covering all those albums up through Blonde on Blonde. But it is a bit of a grab bag because they're coming from a lot of different shows. So it's not like listening to a concert, but it does give you a sense of Bob's live evolution over that period. So I like this one. It gets the occasional spin, but not as much as the some of these other releases. Here's the next live release that I got. This is the Bootleg Series Volume 6, Bob Dylan Live 1964. And this shows the concert at Philharmonic Hall. So this is a show, pre-electric show. The entire show is Bob acoustic, mostly solo. Joan Baez does guest on a few tracks. And this is a really good performance too. I really enjoyed those early pre-electric albums, even though, as I said, up through Blonde on Blonde, Bringing It All Back Home was my favorite album, and I really like his electric period a lot too. But I really enjoy a lot of those songs on the early albums, and so a good live set from that period is really nice. Overall, I would still lean toward the '66 show being one I like a little bit more, but this one is very good also. So I really enjoyed that. And then one more sort of live and whatnot release. This is the most recent one I got. I'm kind of jumping around a little bit in the order that I bought them, but this one was the most recent one I got. This is the No Direction Home soundtrack, Bootleg Series Volume 7, and this one's really good too. So again, it's covering beginning of his career, and even this one even has material back before the first album. The earliest track on here is 1959, and then runs up through Blonde on Blonde. So there's some live stuff, there's some demos, there's some alternate studio takes. So it's a nice collection of alternate versions of songs. It's a really good selection of songs to avoid just giving you the same old, but still really giving you a real sense of where Bob was in his career through that period and how he grew and changed and evolved. So this is a really good collection too. But of those various releases, Live 1966 is my favorite. Now, in the midst of buying those, I got this next release, and first explain really quick why I got this. As I said, I left off with Blonde on Blonde in the last video, and one of my viewers, Matthew Zuckerman, commented on that I really needed, before I moved on to the next studio album, which is John Wesley Harding, I needed to listen to the Basement Tapes. Of course, the Basement Tapes, the album was released in 1975, but all the recordings were from 1967. And he suggested that I get that I look at the album, or possibly also the Bootleg Series release. And so I got the 2 CD version. This is Bob Dylan and the band, the Bootleg Tapes Raw. And it made a lot of sense to me to do that, because although at this point I had not heard John Wesley Harding, I knew just reading that stylistically it was going to be a big change from Blonde on Blonde. And so hearing the evolution through the Basement Tapes recordings would be a good way to get some additional context. So I decided, I'll save the album. I'll buy the album if I keep going through the sequence. When I get to 1975, I'll buy the album as released. So that includes overdubs and things like that. But as I'm hearing the sequence of his recording, go ahead and pick this up so I could hear the raw versions here. And I really like this set a lot. Now, the band does have a lot of influence on the sound on this. There are a lot of times where I listen to it and think, yeah, that's the sound of the band, that when I think of, music from Big Pink, that, because it comes right after this period, that sound is very much there. But it's a lot of great songs on here too. And there's a little bit of electric material on here. You can kind of hear them. To me, as I listen to this, I hear it as the band coming off, that electric tour. There's still maybe some little bit of that vibe left on just a couple of the tracks. Excuse me, but mostly it's moving on to a more sort of rootsier sound. So of these Bootleg Series, I'd say of the live stuff, the Live 66 is the best one that I've gotten, but of all the Bootleg Series, overall, this is my favorite, Basement Tapes Raw. So this is a really good release. I was glad I got it at the point that I got it in the sequence. So after I'd gotten that, and then I was ready. Okay, it was time to get back on this studio album track. But then I decided, well, you know what? In between Blonde on Blonde and John Wesley Harding, at the time there was an additional Bob Dylan release that came out, and that's Bob Dylan's Greatest Hits. Now, originally I thought, it's just a compilation album, I'm going to pass by it, but I thought, well, this is how it would have happened for the people at the time, even though with all those bootleg series and things, I was not really sticking to what people would have necessarily heard at the time. But I thought, well, there's that. CDs are really cheap these days. And it does include one song that's not on any of the studio albums that I'd bought, which is Positively 4th Street. Of course, that was a non-album single. So I thought, well, this will give me that song on a CD. And, maybe a collection of this wouldn't be a bad thing to have of his early stuff, just to have if I'm just in the general mood. And it's a general overview of that period for like a one record set. I think it's a pretty good song selection. So this is pretty good. But I bought that at the same time that I bought John Wesley Harding, the next studio album in the series. Now, as much as I enjoyed kind of those side excursions into the live stuff, the basement tapes and all that, I was really glad to kind of get myself back on track with these studio albums and pick this up. And I have to say, this album, I didn't really have any real expectations on this album. I mean, the only songs that I knew off of here beforehand, I knew, of course, All Along the Watchtower, I knew I'll Be Your Baby Tonight. I'd heard Dylan's version of that, but I was actually a little more familiar with Ian Gillan did a cover of that, like in 2006 or so. And then I also knew, I don't think I necessarily heard the song, The Ballad of Frankie Lee and Judas Priest, but I just knew that title because, if I'm not mistaken, the band Judas Priest got their name from that title. But anyway, I listened to this album, and this one really, really grabbed me. The only albums that immediately after buying it, I listened to back as often as I did this prior to this were Free Will and Bob Dylan and Bringing It All Back Home. This had that same immediate re-listenability to me that those two did. So I really like this one a lot. Now, there are probably one or two other albums in addition to those two that I might say overall is a better album than this, but I just really got into this album. I thought it was a really, really good album. And after the previous albums, the change in pace, I thought was really interesting. Of course, it's not a complete return to his earlier stuff where he's solo acoustic. He's still got a band, but it's much more rootsy and down home kind of approach to the music, and it's a really strong album. I really like this one quite a lot. And then I've gone one album past that so far to wrap up his 60s studio work, and so Nashville Skyline, I got that. This one I'm enjoying too. It didn't grab me the way John Wesley Harding did, but I like it. I like Johnny Cash's guest spot on Girl from the North Country. There's several good songs on this one. Lay Lady Lay, obviously I was familiar with that one. And that also had really got me interested in hearing what this album would sound like because I knew his vocal approach was different. So before I started buying his albums, I thought, well, that may be an album I may like more since, traditionally have not been as big a fan of his voice. But now buying it after buying all those other ones, now I've gotten really used to his voice. I've gotten more accustomed to it and a little more accepting of it. So hearing him do something different was a little off-putting, now having heard everything else in that context. But it's still, it doesn't, I'm not saying it's bad. It was just a little different to get used to. But I do like the album. I think it's got a lot of really good songs on it too. So not quite on the level of, say, John Wesley Harding or, some of the other stuff like I said, Bringing It All Back Home, Free Will and Bob Dylan, the times they are changing. I'd put those albums, Highway 61 Revisited, I'd put all those ahead of Nashville Skyline, but I do think it's a solid listen. So that gets me up through the 60s. I really have enjoyed this. The more I've listened to his stuff, the more appreciation I've really gotten for him. And so I'm looking forward to now moving into the 70s. I think I'm probably going to go, before I pick up the next album, I think I'm going to go back and re-listen to everything I've got, just kind of put it all together and then move on into the 70s. And I'm looking forward to that because Self-Portrait is the next album. And I don't think I know any of the songs off it, but I do know it has one of the most famous bad reviews that was ever in Rolling Stone magazine. So that's got me curious to see if it's really that bad or not. So that, and then New Morning and the albums beyond, I'm looking forward to getting those. So after I get a few more, another 3 or 4 of the studio albums, and then who knows, I may get a few more of the bootleg series and whatnot in that period. I'll do another video, so it may be a couple months from now, but I will do another video to let you know what I think about the early 70s. But so far, up through the 60s, I have to say I've gotten to where I've enjoyed his stuff a lot more than I expected when I'm starting out. So there you go. There's me and Bob Dylan, part 3. Let me know what you think in the comments, and thanks for watching.